Do I need to turn the air down? Everybody good or?
Good.
All right.
Good.
All right, I'm going to call this special called meeting of the Boyle County Fiscal Court, July 7th at 10:30 a.m. to order. And before we get into our regular business, which we only have one item on the agenda, I'd like for us just to take a moment of silence and remember those that are in Texas and part of the flooding, if you all don't mind. All right, thank you. Tragic. So, all right, so today is a special call meeting to discuss the options of a Eastern Bypass, Connector Road, whatever you want to call it, out on the east side, Lexington Road side. This would be a state project. It would be a state highway. And so we're just here to gather information, basically, for the magistrates to ask questions. Kelly Baker is here. He's the Chief District Engineer of District 7. And Casey Smith will be here shortly with him, and he is in the planning department at District 7. So I think Kelly's going to maybe start us off with a little history of how this all came to be many, many years ago, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the invitation to come down and talk a little bit about the project. I will share before we get started, there's nothing new that we're working on right now that caused us to come down here today, but we did want to just kind of share where we're at, kind of the history of the project. We are going through the process right now of gathering information for preparation for projects that's going to be submitted for the next highway plan. We've met with all of our legislators, county judges, and different folks just to kind of get input and what are the priorities. We cover 12 counties, so that's a pretty good task to get through all that. But we do want to know what the local thoughts are on the projects that you have in the area. So we've started that this year. That's a whole year-long process going into a recommended highway plan toward the end of the year, and then obviously next spring will be the next highway plan when the General Assembly is together. So it is important to get feedback, from meetings like this and gather information. And a lot of today is if you have comments or we'd like to hear that, or suggestions or whatever. But this project, came about several years ago. There was a small urban area study that was done for Danville that some of you all may or may not be familiar with. But one of the recommendations out of that was for some type of connector on the east side of town.
Kelly, I'll pause you a second. Sorry. Are we going to have these slides up on
Is
screens?
Casey bring anything?
He's got slides, but I don't know that he had a chance to get.
Are we able? Is Bill here today?
Bill's here.
Are we able to send Bill the
punch
the
that
PDF to put up on the screen so we kind of know what we're talking about here?
Okay.
Please. Sorry.
Yeah, that visual is so important.
I thought we would have that up
Well,
When Casey gets here, he'll have
Casey's got some
but-
handouts too that he's bringing. Yeah.
for everybody in the room, or
Well, I'm not sure how many, but we can make
I don't
copies.
know.
Yeah.
just? That's why I was saying maybe just
Yeah.
having it up on the
Yeah.
screen might be easier for everybody, especially people that are at home watching too.
So out of that study, to help mobility on that side of Danville, there was a recommendation for a connector somewhere over there. It subsequently made it into a highway plan. Back then, I think it stayed, we got started in our office. Once it's in the highway plan, we can request authorization of the funding and start some design work, development work on it. It originally had state funding assigned to the project that we got started on. And I think the last time it was in the highway plan, in case you'll have more of this information, it had some federal funding on it too, which is important to us to be able to get those federal funds and move on those. So we got started and we did some preliminary design work. I will say we did get focused, it seemed more on, and we've got a handout showing that the alternate route closer in toward town, but an alternate never was officially selected. That's sort of, the project fell out of the highway plan, and that's when our work stopped on it, and that was probably around, I think, 2020 or 2018, something back there. So the last few years, there really not done much at all with the project. Recently, and back then, it was looked at, the judge called it a bypass, and I think some have called it different things, but, you know, there was the alternates further out, even out beyond Goggins out there, that kind of got further away.
Bill, I sent it to your email, if you can log in.
Sorry, buddy, they already have this.
Man behind the curtain.
That's right.
It doesn't have a remote, so he's no good.
Oh, okay.
So that's the thing with those alternates, and Casey can talk about this more, and we looked at it more recently as well. There are those alternatives to get it further out of town, but they are more invasive when it comes to the right-of-way needs that would be needed. You know, we try to minimize those impacts as much as possible, and the cost is, you get further out, it makes the route longer, obviously across town, and then the cost really jumps up into a very tens of millions. I don't know what it turned out to be, Casey, but it was probably what, 50, 60 million?
About 70% more than, yeah.
So that in a nutshell is where we're at. And at one time, like I said, we gather information on what's the priorities locally. It was our number one project that we were working on for Boyle County. Last few years. So obviously, when it falls out of the highway plan, we don't have anything to work off of. So that's sort of where it ended for us.
You're talking about like 19 and 20, is that where you said it fell off?
Did you find it in the last one?
Yeah,
so-
so it was on the 2018 highway plan. That's when it was first added to the highway plan with state dollars. And 2020 is when it received federal dollars. It dropped off completely on the 2022 plan.
And the main reason for that was essentially because we had been pushing for 52 to be widened and straightened and fixed. And the city at that time had kind of trying to figure out the word. Had a conversation with Judge Hunt at that time about supporting this connector road, but he didn't realize by supporting the connector road it was going to push down 52, and 52 would have probably already been done by now had we not been kind of led that other way. And so we've had to kind of focus more back on getting 52 back on track, getting 50 straightened, and then back on this. And one of the main reasons we're meeting, and Judge, I'm sorry, I'm speaking here, but is because the city has been pushing for this connector road since I've been in office, you know, I'm on my second term now, to get this connector road, and we've kind of looked at it and don't know that it's the best route. They're kind of hell bent on this route, that option A on here that you'll see when we get it up here. But and so Judge and myself and a few others talked to Casey and Kelly and asked that, you know, we come up with some possible alternates if we're going to do this. And that's kind of, this is what the state's kind of come up with as some alternate routes. My biggest issue with option A is, you know, there's several problems with local businesses that would be taken out. And where it lets you out, it's more of a safety issue for me, is if it lets you right out on Lexington Avenue, right there by the water treatment plant. And the whole idea is to get all the traffic coming from Junction City and South Lincoln County that way, and then everything on 150 coming from Lincoln County and Casey County that way, to bypass Danville. And the idea of putting a roundabout at East Main and then just dropping everything out on Lexington Avenue right there, you're talking big trucks, you're talking lots of stuff that just doesn't seem safe to me, outside of the harm it would do to the businesses that go through it there as well. So that's just kind of some other history on this is why, once we found out that 52 was going to be pushed down because of this, that's where the court kind of pushed back and said we really can't support this connector road if it's going to take a priority over 52 and the safety improvements that need to be made there. So that's what now the state's working on 52 and some options, and it's at the higher priority level. So now we're back to the city is pushing more and more to get this connector road, and that's why we're here to see what options the state has come up with as possible alternatives for some sort of eastern bypass.
And that, as far as priority projects or how many projects you get, that goes back to when the projects are state funded, because honestly, there's only so much state funds to go around, and when you get into a particular area, a lot of times it does come down to one or two main projects on state funding. That's a little different on federal funding, and that's why it was important to get federal funding for it, because federal funding is going to be on top of what we get for state funded projects. See, looks like they've got some things up here. Casey's got a few handouts, or
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Well, apologize for my tardiness.
it's okay.
I had a little fight with our Xerox machine.
They always win.
Well, luckily I won this time. We actually had something, so it took some time. So. But yeah, so Kelly and Judge Bottoms reached out to us to talk about, how we ended up where we are on
Yeah.
the Connector Road project, and where are we on that project?
I think that's okay.
For me to get it out to the public, I gotta go back upstairs.
That, and somebody said something about closed captions aren't available
Closed captions.
on the
It may not be on the live cast, it will be on the
replay.
on the replay.
Cool, thank you, sir.
Thanks,
They got
Bill.
the CC button, one of the two.
Yep.
I'll try to describe it as best as I can, but yeah, I just wanted to start off as what was happening before the project became a highway plan project. And there have been several studies, in fact, dating back to the 70s, I think we shared with you, Judge, about having an eastern Danville bypass. But there has been studies since then about how to address the congestion, the amount of traffic, particularly traveling down Kentucky 34, and what options are there in order to help distribute a lot of that traffic based on the demands that we are seeing. The first study that I'd like to share with you all, and some of you have been here long enough, you probably remember this study. The Transportation Cabinet did a Danville small urban area study. This is, of course, a planning study. It is done in conjunction with the city of Danville as well as the local officials of Boyle County. And it did come up with some recommendations of long-term and short-term solutions. And looking at the first page after the cover, you'll see that there's the employment areas in the area. Now, granted, this has been done in 2014. It may be a little bit dated, but still, it does project solutions that would be needed into the future. So it gives you an idea of where all the employment locations are. On the next sheet, you'll see that there are there's also population and employment, and over in the particularly in the immediate eastern Danville area, we do have over like 500 households at a subdivision out there right by the golf course. And then we also have vehicle registration maps. And so we take all this information, and I know this is a lot to go over, but we do take all this information and be able to try to model what the traffic demands are in the future. And how we do that is by origin destination estimates. With traffic analysis, we identify different various zones. We have them all identified for Boyle County. And it turns out that Boyle County has about as many traffic analysis zones as Fayette County does. And what we are trying to do is we identify origin destinations, and then based on the information that we have from that, be able to predict what paths of travel people will be utilizing. Now, this would be for vehicle movements, personal vehicles, as well as truck movements as well. I do like to show you that based on that analysis on this map that we have highlighted, the amount of traffic that is anticipated on Kentucky 34 based on current daily traffic information. And we are seeing over 15,000 vehicles up and down Kentucky 34. A very heavy utilized roadway for what it is being almost like a neighborhood road. When we see numbers of 15,000, that's when the engineers start really looking at 4-laning a roadway. And I assume you cannot imagine what that would do on Wilderness Road, for example. It would have a very heavy impact. And so that's when we start looking at alternatives. Now going into this map right here, okay, this was the network that was analyzed for this traffic modeling. And you'll notice that the East Danville connector, where we have it laid out, was identified as a location. And also the 1970 study that showed the East Danville bypass was also included in this model. Now the important thing to think about in traffic management is being able to establish a network. Now, in order to do that, we do like seeing a grid system, we do like having alternatives, essentially providing a highway network that would actually provide alternative routes even to get to the same location. It helps disperse traffic. And so as we go on to some of these maps, such as this one, that on the top says 7-210 and Ghost Extension. That's what it was called back then. It's essentially extending Ghost up to Kentucky 34. You will see the before and after snapshot. Now the color coding that you see on this network, greens indicate a fair level of service, while the reds, oranges, and yellows represent times where we're starting to see congestion. Now, if you go into the middle of that circle, you'll see that the East Danville connector is not shown on there. However, on the after, where we actually model it, you'll see that the red portion on Wilderness Road has went down to an orange level, and we see Connector Road actually carrying some of that traffic away from that area where we have that green and the yellow. And we also evaluated what the East Danville bypass would look like. And that's what this map is with the larger oval. It's the 7-210 and East Danville bypass. You'll see that it still remains green, actually, and it's not pulling off as much traffic from the area. Another thing that I should also note is the red area on the northern part where Kentucky 34 and the North Danville connector comes together. And it's showing some traffic funneling. So with the red area indicating a poor level of service, when you are directing traffic into one location, you have what we call a bottleneck situation. And so that was something that I kind of wanted to share as far as traffic management throughout this area. Really, I think that the biggest solution here is that one cannot perform alone. Okay, so in order to establish this network, we need to have multiple alternatives. East Danville connector is only one part of that solution, while the East Danville bypass would be the second part. And so it really, both of them would really need to move on in order for this to be successful per the small urban area study. Now, like I said, this has been studied on multiple occasions. Some of you may recognize these graphics from a previous study that we've done. This was done by Integrated Engineering. We do have typical sections that were evaluated for a 2-lane and a 4-lane section. What we're considering for the East Danville connector up to this point would be a 2-lane section until we have the traffic numbers where we could continue on with the 4-lane section. And then they also evaluated various different alternatives, of which on the last sheet, which has Exhibit B, indicates an acceptance of it through the Danville-Boyle County comp plan. As you'll see in the green line, it's one of the collector streets that is represented there. So that's really what took us to the point of actually having a project within the highway plan. These numerous studies that looked at alternatives in this region as far as managing traffic through this area is really what led us to this point. The other concerns that we have found through that small urban area study is the amount of truck traffic. There's heavy truck movements going through there. Particularly on the US 150 portion, I believe we were looking at 16% trailer truck traffic on US 150. So this connector was supposed to assist in redirecting some of that truck traffic, but not going so far out of town, which they may be making deliveries within the Danville area. Now, so we had, as I was saying, in the 2018 highway plan, this is when the project was first introduced for design. It had state funds on it, so not much happened at that time. Then in 2020 highway plan, that's where federal funds was actually allocated for this project. Those funds were authorized in 2021, where we've actually began that project, and we were really working quickly on it. It was the #1 project actually in Boyle County, of course with Kentucky 52 in that mix. So with having the federal funds in place, we moved through what we call preliminary line and grade, which is where we actually test the concepts that were studied to make sure that, with the investments that we were making, that we were actually making improvements. We made some decisions on whether roundabouts should be utilized at some of the intersections. That was all done through preliminary line and grade. Now, the only thing, though, is that no decision was made, so we were at a holding point. Once the project dropped off the 2022 highway plan, that's where we couldn't really move forward at that point. So we never made it to a point where we decided on an alternative. Plus, being a federally funded project, we never finished the environmental document as well, due to the uncertainties on the timing for this project. So it was put on the shelf. Now, I did want to share with you the alternatives that we still have currently on the shelf for this project. Alternatives 2 and 3 actually go along the side of in this magenta area. It's kind of hard to see, but there's an area in there that was zoned for a roadway.
Can you help us to identify them by their alphabet?
No, these are different.
No,
These are different maps.
Totally different?
I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with those maps actually, but yeah, no, the magenta area that you see where the roadway crosses, alternatives 2 and 3, those are the alternatives that actually utilize that area that was zoned for a future roadway project.
So these are the alternatives for the original route.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And in the slide, there is 2 additional routes that we can talk about as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it looks like
this is
route-
just for the main route.
Yeah, it looks like Route A, identified in green,
Which is this.
a representation of this.
Of this, yeah.
project, yeah. Now, in past meetings, we have talked about different options. So the idea behind the scope of this project is to be able to identify opportunities of redistributing traffic and, between Kentucky 34 and US 150. So the Route B that's on there, typically is within scope. But we do want to measure the effectiveness because we are talking about higher estimates, for this option. And plus, the construction estimates that were presented actually does not include what will be involved for the right-of-way utilities, I don't believe. So that's something that needs to be taken into account when looking at these numbers. However, the construction numbers, I believe, are somewhere around the $43 million range, so it is significantly more than what we had for the original project. Plus,
Not really, hold on, guys, not really, because the city had their contractors out talking about this, and they kind of came in at 32 million just to do this 1.5 miles of the original. So I mean, we're not.
Well, take it by a per mile standpoint, okay, it could be less. But we do have to remember, we do have the right-of-way utilities and then also a bridge crossing that would be involved. And so,
Yeah.
these are preliminary estimates, obviously. Once we get through final design, we'll have more solid numbers. But yeah, it would cost more still, and we would have to pretty much start over the design phase as well for that project, since this alternative Route B was not actually looked at.
When you talk about bottlenecking, you don't have any concerns about putting that much traffic on Lexington Avenue? So on the original plan, it all pumps out on Lexington Avenue, right there between the water treatment plant and the Christian church.
Right, so I have to go back to the modeling research.
Because this is from 2014 essentially, right? Was when you guys first started this, was
Yeah,
2014.
that's correct. But no, we do project those numbers out. So we're still within the range. Usually we project out to 20, 25 years of future traffic growth. And a lot of that takes into consideration, what's on the future land use maps of comp plans, what future development could be happening in that area. And what this connector project, what really highlighted the benefit of the connector project is it does provide alternatives, closer to Danville, and also provide connections for any new development that happens in that area.
But that all would have to be, it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
11 years now. 11
Right.
years.
And I
Change
just,
those estimates, in the last few years, estimates have escalated.
yeah, and I understand what you're saying, but effectiveness, this one, 32 million. One of the others, you're talking about another 45 million. So what's the likelihood that we're gonna get 70, 80 million dollars of state and federal funds to do both of these projects?
Not very good.
Yeah.
Well, not
So-
at the same time.
Not at
Remember,
the same
this is an iterative.
Oh, I'm well
process.
aware. I mean, and we were talking about this earlier. This is a 10-year project by the time all's said and done.
Absolutely.
So, your 2014 numbers are now, 20, 25
years,
years
yeah.
down the line on this. And so 10 years to get one of these done, and then probably another 10 years to get the other one done. You're looking at, basically, we always joke around that, by the time you start something, it's obsolete by the time it gets finished.
And we do, around our district, we've got several 40 plus, 50 plus $1 million projects and beyond. They're just sitting there.
Right.
Yeah, because finding those kind of projects is tough.
It's significant.
Yeah.
So does it make sense to try to put two projects together, or try to come up with the better project that's going to alleviate the problem? I mean, I know it's not going to do everything, and I don't think any of these are great, but do you really want to? That first one has bothered me since day one, and that's why I fought it since day one. Because it just, by the time it's done, in 10 years, we're gonna have another census. We're gonna be looking at, a lot more people here in Boyle County, and that's problematic in a lot of ways. So do we try to find something that's better served to actually do the full bypass?
I think you hit on it, on the nail there. So
I usually do.
we are hit the nail on the head. I'm not good with any of those.
It's all right. It's a long drive down. Too many podcasts. I got you.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no, I mean, well, let's face it, we're engineers. We're very objective, in our decision making too, and so. There are, some gray areas and some different aspects that are considered, but we also have to consider, whether these would be effective alternatives. And with a lot of our studies in particular, we do look at benefit cost analysis and, for how much we are spending on a certain road, how much benefit are we really gaining?
Right.
And so I think that's what that modeling part from that study did show, was that, we were having a greater benefit with this location, and then as Danville continues to grow, then we start looking at expanding that network further eastward in Danville. Putting a road, the bypass in now, wouldn't really, it doesn't really address the amount of vehicles that will be entering onto Lexington Avenue who actually don't have another option. They do have to, the subdivisions and the golf course, they do have to go to Lexington Avenue. So, but yeah, it's one of those things where, you expand it phase by phase, and like we were saying, it doesn't have to be all at one time.
Yeah, but the other thing we have to think about too on this is, if we ask for such a large chunk of money on these projects that are pretty much gonna be 20 years, what's the likelihood of us getting other money for other projects out in Tom's district that we might need, Paula's district down south? that's gonna lock up a lot of money that we're not gonna see improvements in other parts of the county.
And part of that too is, we do look to see how much money has already been invested
Right.
within a project, so.
Or in a community.
Yeah, so Kentucky 34 or Kentucky 52, we've already started in the design process. In fact, 52, I think we're getting into the right-of-way phase. And so, looking at, when we prioritize projects, part of what we look at is how far we're into it, because at the end, we really would like to check off projects, on the
Right.
highway plan they're complete. I mean, I think it's a win for everyone when we complete projects. But yeah, no, we do have to, we do keep that in mind. So
Right.
if we're already pretty far along the right-of-way and utility stages of a project, chances are they're going to move forward into construction. I can't guarantee that, but obviously it's a
Yeah.
legislative decision. But no, it's there is a higher likelihood just to get something on the ground.
Magistrate Ellis has a
Yeah,
comment.
sure. Yeah.
Magistrate Cullen and I are the two longest serving current members of this court.
And Jamie.
Jamie.
He's not here.
Yeah.
Early on in my tenure, which is now over 6 years, but for that first 4 years and then into a year and a half of my continued tenure, I was the designated individual from the court for economic development. I'm going to go in a different direction of dollars from road building. Over that period of time, my great frustration was, for example, in a 10-year span predating me and coming into my tenure on economic development, we had spent somewhere in the neighborhood, public and private dollars combined, around $7 or $8 million for economic development, and we lost 78 or 79 employees. In corporate life, where I was forever, that was tantamount to being a failure. I never recall a project presented to us of more than $3 to $5 million. I do recall that a gentleman who helped us had a funnel, and in that 4-year period of time, I recall 83 or 84 proposals that we were looking at, and at the end of those 4 years, I think we captured 12 or 14 businesses, and I don't recall any of them being multi-million-dollar businesses. If you look at the map on the wall, we have a current investment by one individual with a major distillery and much, much more, and $65 million, which I think could probably account for that 4 years and still have dollars invested in our community far, far beyond. That project, that corporation has brought us $65 million of current investment. On the map for that, and it's a distillery, there is a continuing proposal for 13 rick houses, and once they would be completed, and it's that section right there, I'm colorblind, but it looks blue to me, where Route B goes through. Considering those 13 additional rick houses at $35 million each, you're talking about something that transcends any dream that I had when I moved to a small community, having lived in large communities. $455 million worth of additional investment. Mine is the most agricultural district that we have. My folks have a contract raising all the corn on that property in order to make bourbon here. So agriculture comes in, agricultural suppliers, tractors, everything that it takes to complete projects like that. And then I played with some numbers, and thank goodness Magistrate Cullen was helping me. Imagine us being so successful in Boyle County, and we haven't been over my 6-year tenure in building homes, bringing in people, lost 84, 85 people in a 10-year period of time. Imagine that we're so successful that we build 500 $300,000 homes. Wow, we've captured $150 million of investment versus $455 million were these brick houses to be built. I always look at things like the center cut of a country ham. I never can afford to just buy that, but you're looking at the center cut of the country ham, and folks are already investing in a prime piece of property that, my goodness sakes, would be sliced in half if we were to move forward with Plan B on that picture up there. Now think about again, I can't think of a $5 million investment that's been consummated in my 6 years. And we're thrilled, and I'm thrilled, coming out of healthcare, that we have underway right now a commitment, a solid commitment to Ephraim McDowell's $120 million expansion program. That's 1/4 of what just the potential for the Bourbon development will be. And beyond that, the vision for that piece of property destroyed if Plan B, I want to make sure I get it right, if Plan B were to be approved, you would destroy a project 4 times of what we're looking at with the expansion of Ephraim McDowell. I just sing from the 20+ mile ridge tops in my district how foolish it would be to even begin to consider dividing that property and destroying what is already on the books. And as Magistrate Cullen said, many of these plans, including that one, predate folks coming in here for that investment. And I'm bothered from a legal standpoint that I believe the date was April 30th last year. Whatever easement was going to be allowed dividing that property expired. I literally was watching for something to happen midnight that night a year ago and saying, hallelujah. Any idea of destroying what was in the early stages of development and now is well underway with the $65 million that's already been invested, which is multiple times more than everything economic development-wise that took place in my first 4 years.
I think you're speaking of Route A, though.
He's spoken to A and B.
I'm looking up this map.
A and B, the green and the orange is the ones I'm worried about. And just to clarify, the April 30th comment you know, that's why the price tag is so expensive on that mile and a half compared to the others, where you got house, well, actually on A and B, you've got houses, you've got lots of farmland you're splitting up there. That's why it's so expensive, so.
When we have other property that our current form of economic development is working on right now, where I'm sure 100 homes could be developed. And that would be a very optimistic net in the next 5 to 10 years while this project, if it were to go on, would take place. That's of immediate value to us right now because that land is secured for development. We still have land in the original industrial park, which can bring in several $1 million corporation or plant or whatever. This might seem very rash, but in thinking it through, there could be alternative routes or no routes at all, and we would be moving forward strategically with a $500 million or more investment, which would make anything else that I can imagine in my lifetime, and I'm looking outward, anything else would pale in comparison to, in any way, shape, or form, jeopardizing what's already going on out here.
Sorry we jumped on you, but I really wanted to make sure that we kind of got some info on future investment with a project this size. Because I know that you also are talking about, you know, Lebanon Road and the Allen Springs Crosspike. You know, that road needs to be done. You know, right there it was talked about, it's gonna be a couple million, but with some of the changes now, you're looking at
13, I think.
13 million, is that right?
13.
Yeah, so that's Paula's backyard right there, so. That's one of our big concerns. So I understand the city is looking at its small piece of the pie. We have to look at the whole county. You know, that's why we're asking for these alternates. Because we've got a much bigger piece of the pie we got to plan for.
So going back to the alternate routes, can you kind of describe, just for the people that are here, where those starting and ending, so like for Route B, is that starting at Kemper?
That's
Is that
Kemper,
okay?
right, yeah,
All right,
so-
and then going to
This is
150?
Going down to 150. I think it actually goes a little further south where it ties it into the bypass. But yeah, it does start at Kemper. It's going to be we're going to be really threading this one in. But yeah, Kemper Road, there are houses on there. There's also a rock wall that we'd also have to consider that runs almost the entire length of Kemper.
Right.
But then also the golf course as well. So it's going to be really tricky. We're trying to keep that construction cost down by avoiding having to make so many crossings over, river crossings. We still have one going further south toward the Kentucky 52 side, but yeah, it's going to be a very tight corridor.
And that one's at about 34 million right now, is that right?
43.
No, the 40, yeah.
43?
It's on the-
Okay.
Is that a 2-lane?
It'd just be a 2-lane. Yeah, that's the thing. We wouldn't have much room
Okay.
to go on that, particularly in the Kemper Lane area. Also, it would also require some work at the intersection there with Kentucky 34 as well.
Casey, that's only construction too.
Correct. That
Yeah.
is construction.
Yeah.
Property.
Correct.
Yeah, right. Right.
And I think the design estimate's on the top of those columns too. And you also notice that the design also increases upwards of $3 million.
Okay, so Route C is the extension of the bypass.
Yeah, it comes off of 150, goes up to 34.
Yeah. Okay. And that's at 34?
Yeah. The only
But it's
That's
more
the one
miles.
positive with that is where it loops out, you've got room to move the road based on whether people would be interested or not in selling property.
Yeah, there would be more flexibility of where that alignment would be. I'm not sure how that one was drawn exactly, but
Route C also be 2-lane.
That one also
They
approved.
they were estimated as two.
But just like 2168,
Yeah, room.
will, room would be included to widen if needed.
And again, going back to the traffic modeling, from what was said between Route C and Route A on that map, it's about the closest approximation we have. The travel demand for Route A did come out higher than Route C, so the amount of traffic diverted isn't as much or isn't as effective on Route C. And the other thing too is that being closer to town, I understand there's a lot of economic development investment going on in this area. One thing also is that a lot of times the continued success of these businesses are reliant on a well, developed highway transportation network as well. It's not the first time we've actually come across that. It's UPS actually threatening to leave out of our Louisville because we're plowing our roads.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
stuff like that.
And that would be an urban type, it would be a curb and gutter.
It would be
type
urban.
Type street that, you get out on B and C, you're looking at more rural section, maybe shelters. It wouldn't be a curb and gutter type downtown type.
Maybe a nicer Goggin Lane, maybe. It's like ditches and
So, of all the projects that we've kind of went over and discussed and been tossed out, what do you all feel is the most important project?
I think that having a project in the next highway plan is definitely going to help us to move on any of these alternatives. It's Danville is growing eastward. I think we all know that a lot of money is being invested in that area, and so we have
Growing in the south too,
connections.
isn't it?
Yes.
Good, yeah, I'm going south. Yeah. So one piece at a time, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, as like with the additional housing and the industry that's happening in that area, we need some form of north-south connection. Because right now, as it sits, we're having to go into town, to Danville, in order to service any of those areas. A lot of the subdivisions are connected to like 34, US 150. All those go right into town before you go out to Lexington, for instance. So,
Well, that was my understanding, that the connector route was to help alleviate the traffic that's coming from the south, to give them an alternate route to get to Lexington Road, to go to Lexington, and not have to go up
Yeah.
through
And-
to
and
Main
should
Street.
also
And we
be
look at
there.
projections, but basically we're trying to deal with that
Mhm.
existing,
The
with
num-
existing traffic.
Yeah, the numbers.
Would have been nice to have seen something that gave us an option of 150 goes Pike 52. Kind of utilizing that existing roads as well.
But there goes Pike, you're saying?
Well, and we were thinking about Ghost Pike too. That Ghost Pike obviously needs improvements too.
Very
It's an
bad.
old, rural, narrow road in the middle
Yeah.
of town.
You got a lot
Yeah.
of truck traffic going up and
Yes.
down that.
Especially since
Yes.
somebody put in a no turn lane at 150 and Stanford Road.
Yeah, that was also another highlight of this, where the connector project is sitting around now, is addressing those Pikes.
But it would just be nice to improve roads that need to be improved and incorporate that all into the plan. I mean, Ghost Pike needs to be improved. 52 is needing to be improved. And so if you can kill two birds with one stone, and then start trying to implement road improvements that way. I mean, I'll be honest, we talked about Goggin at some point, but Goggin's too populated right now to do anything on Goggin. That was one of the things.
One thing I was gonna throw out and ask, I mean, does that Route A route have any benefit to the distillery development at all with access or entrances or any? I mean,
No.
Is it just detrimental because you need the property for the rick houses or? I guess I'm trying to understand a little better about.
The property for the rick houses, the putting, tractor trailer traffic right through what they're trying to build out there, from my understanding. And then, I worry about the existing businesses around there. Kurt Singer's been, a long-standing business in this community for decades. It would wipe that out. The recycling plant will wipe it out. You got, Cobblestone, you know, and other businesses in there that would just get wiped out with that whole plan there, which makes it very expensive. And so, yeah, back in 2014, when there wasn't, you know, some stuff happening in that area made sense, but now it's just, I don't know, I think, especially that upper area on Lexington Avenue, my understanding that that's already been being platted out for residential. And so that's gonna kill neighborhoods right there. Plus there's sinkholes all over through that whole property. So, I mean, you wanna talk about expensive, that's,
It would provide connectivity.
Yeah, it would- it-
for the
it
site.
would.
We have to remember that.
but,
I normally don't do this, but because this is kind of a special type meeting, I do want to hear from some of the people in the audience. So if you have a comment or a question or a suggestion, if you'll just raise your hand, we'll let you speak. Yes, sir?
come on up, Mr.
My
Campbell.
name is Dan Campbell. I'm the registered agent for LMD Holdings, Luca Mariano. And I'd just like to thank you for the time. It was sort of a early warning meeting. I don't know when people were notified, but we were never notified. And we have the majority property out there. I don't know whose responsibility it is to notify us, but I would hope in the future we'd be better informed. I don't know what the rest of the people maybe feel the same way.
Sir, help me understand on the map, the land you're talking about that's yours.
Luca Mariano.
Luca Mariano.
Oh,
still-
you are representing, okay, thank you.
I'm the registered agent for them.
Thank you.
And just to let you know, Dan, this was actually a meeting that was supposed to be for the magistrates to kind of talk about the three options that the state has come up with. It wasn't to focus on one.
Okay.
That's why it wasn't like, hopefully our next steps will be that we possibly have a landowner discussion, because normally we don't let public speak in fiscal
Right.
court meetings.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
And so our plan was probably going to be to have the magistrates educated on these proposals, these options, because we did ask District 7 to kind of come up with these plans. And so the next meeting would probably have been either speaking with the landowners in these areas and have a meeting that way, or just have a full public hearing and go that route. And that's where you would have been notified.
Well, I appreciate that. But I remember late last winter, we had a meeting down at a little church on 52. And we had proposals with that when you guys were there. And there was questions and answers at that time, or at least you were soliciting information, and that's really all we're asking for, to get all the information out.
That was on the 52 highway improvement.
Correct.
Yeah,
And go straight. Boyle County.
yeah.
Right, Curly?
Yes.
It was just bonus, we just showed up today.
They had nothing better to do. They're like, let's go to Boyle County.
But I guess in representing the distillery project out there, in that total development project, as the magistrate, Mr. Ellis, had indicated, it's a significant amount of money coming into our community. And I hate to see that whole project taken apart, because I was instrumental in putting that whole thing together. So, acquiring all the property. So what we're looking at is continued development. I know for a fact there's been a lot of negative publicity in the Boyle County area, city and Boyle County area, referencing the financial status of that group of Luca Mariano. It's been published, and has been published in a positive way. It's been negative. Well, let me inform you right now that there are investors coming in to complete that project in its entirety. Okay? So if there's any question on that, and we'll have final, I gotta be careful how I say this, we'll have final verification of funds within a short period of time. So the county can feel a little bit assured that this thing will move forward. And it's a significant project. Department of Tourism is really promoting it and trying to help. I do feel that, yes, we do need an alternate roadway around Danville. We need a bypass, not a thoroughfare. And my real estate business over the years, and in my other business and industry as a materials manager, traffic manager, I'm very familiar with roadways, okay? I do feel that the original proposal, as was presented off Goes Pike years ago, to me, just looking at what you have, is the most advantageous for the total county. That's just my opinion. And but I'd just like to say thank you for allowing me to say a few words. And the project that LMD Holdings, Luca Mariano, is moving forward financially. So you can feel assured to that effect.
So you don't feel like that it would be advantageous at all for the connector road to come in front of Luca Mariano as far as getting more traffic and
Might create
possibly more
traffic.
customers?
The only real advantage of that particular road is for the city of Danville and Center College. So take it for what it's worth, people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sir, you've given me all the more comfort from that standpoint because I've read the newspaper articles, and when you had the opening 2-3 weeks ago, Francesco made a very good presentation of the vision for our community. And again, I just cannot fathom jeopardizing a project that would probably, I'd love for somebody to run the numbers of the last 50 years of anything close to just project alone that you're working on versus all the investment in this community over the past 50 years, because $455 million just for rich houses alone, plus all the remaining issues. Help us by describing some of the other points of the vision of what would go up on that property that folks in this room may not have heard about, but I heard about again 3 weeks ago. That is unbelievable compared to what we've done in my 6 years, and I believe in the last 20 years.
The vision, the long-term vision, is actually posted on a bulletin board out there. People can see it's been on Highway 52. We've had signs out there for the last 6 years as to the long-range plans, which would include, obviously, the renovation of the William Crow House. It's the oldest stone home west of the Alleghenies, 1783. It's on the National Historic Registry. But people don't realize another thing, is that William Crow, back in 1800, about 1802 or 1803, applied for and got a written permit for a distillery on that property. But it was all part of Lincoln County at the time. But so technically it's in Boyle County, so that's technically the oldest distillery in Boyle County. People don't realize that, but those are just little incidentals. But the renovation of that particular house, the expansion of the pond, aesthetically looking over the countryside, we have a crop ground that's going to be utilized as we originally planned to have a full circle of agriculture. In other words, we raise the crop, the corn, process the corn, take the stillage from the corn, feed it back to cattle that we have out there, and then manure.
100 cattle is what I understand.
There's 100 head out there right now, yes. But it's a full circle, and that's really in agriculture what you want. I mean, I have an ag background a little bit too, so at one point I farmed about 1,400 acres, so I know a little bit about it. But realistically, that's part of it. There's a village that's going to be developed. There's an amphitheater out there to bring music, festivities into our area. That was promoted by our former mayor, Mr. Paris. He was in full support at the time. But realistically, you have that. You have possibility of a hotel out there, possibility of a campground out there. You know, tourism type factor to bring everything in. And the current distillery is what they call a mini distillery, basically. And there's room and approved for a larger distillery if needed. But we'd rather keep the mini, or what I call craft distillery. Do that, let us do its job, and it'll serve the area well. And tax-wise, you'll be bringing a lot of people into town for tourism. You'll have obviously the multiple taxes on rec houses, you know, so that's a benefactor. And And there's a few other things involved in that as far as income that's coming in. So the full project in its entirety will support this community in a major way.
This is
All right.
why I came up with that crazy formula of 500 homes at $300,000 apiece. Don't even touch the edge of the financial benefit that would accrue to our entire community.
Well, not just that, with 500 homes out there, that new city sewer plant would be, they'd have to expand it in a hurry.
All right, George? No? Okay. Anyone else like to speak?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am?
But I live
If you
right
don't mind to
next,
stand up.
I'm Diane Pendergraft. We live right next door to the distillery. So, my dad was Sparky Turner, and I know it's just a small business, you know, it's a small shop. But, that's been in my family for years. And, you know, if it bypasses, I'm not saying go through the distillery, but if it bypasses and goes through ours, you're taking, I grew up, so just wanted to throw that out there. And we do have businesses there, so.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Like to- Yes, sir.
I'm the
Mind to
manager.
stand?
I'm the facility manager at, well, it used to be Mid-State Recycling. It's now River Metals Recycling. And River Metals Recycling is owned by Nucor, the largest recycling company in North America. And they employ over 32,000 people. And I just want to say, if they weren't prepared to buy our place with future, you know, for future, they wouldn't have spent the money to buy our place, which they bought all of Mid-State's stuff. But I'm just letting you know who I am,
Okay.
and by the things, you know, goes right through our building. But, you know, I have several employees, several families been feeding. I've been there for 20 years, and it's a service to the community. And I'd
Valuable.
like to keep it that.
Yes, very
Thank
valuable.
y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Said it better than me, Tommy, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Questions, comments? All right.
So
So, here we
would-
are.
Yeah, I would go back and I hate to say it, send it back to the drawing board, but I would like some alternatives of how we can fix roadways that we have and utilize those, and then kind of incorporate a bypass if we're gonna go that route. But again, we got Lebanon Road, we got 34 on my end, we got some others that need to be fixed too, and I really worry that we might end up jeopardizing any funding for those projects by signing on for something of this magnitude, and then losing so many businesses and homes and development and property. So,
And Judge, for a change, I really do promise this will be my last comment. But we're talking 8, 10, 12 years out versus immediacy of an incredible investment that we do not want to jeopardize. Roads versus all that time to build them and acquire all those properties. And heaven forbid, a lot of our citizens that we represent losing a home to eminent domain because the roads would move them out and again take a decade to build versus what we have right now in front of us that can be fully developed in the next, am I too optimistic, 5 years?
It's use 5 years as a base,
Thank you.
more or less.
I think we all, probably all, most of us, I'll say most of us agree that something needs to be done. Some type of connector route
And to Casey's point. and
get the traffic
Yeah.
out of downtown, but,
If there's not a project, we can't,
yeah.
we won't be looking at anything.
Yeah.
We need something identified in the highway plan to give us the ability to.
34.
Hopefully 34 will be the next, we've got a good start on 52 and 34.
Yeah.
But it is, to your point, we're gonna need funds continuing in the highway plan
Right.
to finish out the bases.
and honestly, if you don't have that done before you even consider a connector road, you're just gonna be creating a headache and a half trying to dump all that traffic out onto Lexington and 34 if improvements on 34 aren't. So this is definitely one of those things where it needs to happen after, if it happens at all.
With the connector we've got out there now, I mean, we are seeing there's that traffic, instead of taking the west bypass to get toward Lancaster, they're taking the connector we built, cutting across Goggin there, so that is getting increased traffic.
Yeah, it is. I live right off it, I know.
Yeah, Goggin traffic is really picked up.
And it's difficult to follow the existing Goggin and widening, you know, you're in people's yards.
Well, I mean,
front yards
and
and so
that's
forth,
a
too.
perfect example of a road that needs to be improved, you know, widened, you know, that another road that the state owns, state manages, you know, there's parts of there, you can't have two cars going by at the same time,
Yeah.
you know, and then,
So
so,
it's just 2 lanes, you don't have much of a shoulder.
No.
You got ditches, if you get
Yeah.
off the road.
there's no shoulder.
Not very forgiving once you get off the road.
I don't know what Kentucky has against shoulders, but they don't like them.
So is there any way to come up with another connector road?
I guess where we stand right now is, you know, we're not gonna push a project that's not
Yeah,
supported
yeah.
locally, so that's where we stand.
So-
We wanna look at,
Plan A would be your all's project.
but whatever we do, we always, Casey can speak more to this, we look at alternates, you know, we're not gonna
Yeah,
hone in on just one spot and go with that. We want, whatever we look at, we want 2 or 3 alternatives to look at and
Yeah.
compare.
That was the point that I was trying to come across too, is that we're still in preliminary line, we're still in preliminary design, but that way, we haven't chosen an alternative yet. We haven't even finished up the environmental document yet, so we're not held to a specific location at this point. But the thing is that, you know, it was completely removed out of the highway plan starting in 2022, and never showed up in 24. And that's the reason why it got shelved. And that's what we don't want to, you know, we don't like shelving projects, you know, we would like to see them actually completed. And as I was saying, you know, in the east side of Danville, there's not really good north-south connectivity. You know, it's almost like, well, a lot of Kentucky actually doesn't have much east-west connectivity actually.
Right.
So that's something that, you know, we're hoping to have this one completed as an expansion of our existing, you know, transportation network.
okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
I ask these gentlemen, you're talking about state funding and federal funding. What percent of what is the state percent, what's the federal percent?
It's federally funded, a lot of federal programs are 20 state, 80 federal.
So your local taxpayers would be, state taxpayers would be at a 20% factor rather than,
We have a match.
I think that's important for everybody to know.
There is a match to it, yeah.
That's a whole lot better than 100% state.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, there's this misconception, if it's just in a highway plan, we're gonna work on it. Because a lot of times, there's you know, all these projects in there, and they're all state funded across the state, and there's not enough state funds to cover all that. So you end up prioritizing, not just in our district, but across the state, which is more than
So if you had to reach out for a different alternative that they presented here, would that 80% still, factor still exist from the federal?
Right, if it's outdated, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a reason to do it then.
Now, of course, you know, we have been running on federal funds from the 2020 highway plan, so we're gonna have to hope for federal funds for the 2026 plan, you know, coming up next year. You know, if we come back and see state funds on it, there's a high likelihood it's not gonna move. The thing about federal funds is that we have to demonstrate fiscal constraint with federal funds, you know, otherwise,
You're
MSWA.
supposed to, the city of Danville does.
Well, for federal funds, so we actually submit a plan, and they have to approve it. And so with the state program, we don't have that restriction, so it's padded, so.
So what do you all need from the court today? Do you need permission to do anything as far as go back and look at anything
No, I
or?
don't think, we don't have anything to
Okay.
work off of or move with, so I mean, we don't need anything today. I guess
Okay.
what we'll be looking toward is the next highway plan, to see
Okay.
if there's anything in there or not.
Direction from us at some point, I guess?
Yeah,
So something to Representative Elliott to, you
Yeah.
know, because we're gonna come up with a recommended highway plan and send it over to the governor, but really at the end, it has to be enacted through Congress or through our legislators and stuff. That would involve their input as well.
well, we really, really appreciate you all being here today. This is, treat for us to have you here and talk to us in open forum and, yeah, so we really appreciate your time.
Actually, it does help in the decision-making process.
Yeah, yeah.
I think one thing we all can agree on and ask of you guys is any help with getting a lot of these roads mowed and trimmed back. We would all greatly appreciate some of these state roads getting finished. I know your guys are busy, but any extra help we could get with that would be huge for all of us.
Yeah, with the wet season, our mowers have been behind everywhere trying to keep up.
Right.
We contract, Boyle County's contract mowing, so we get 3 cycles a year.
Yeah.
So we try to manage those best we can.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to start the second cycle of.
Yeah, county is too. All right, well, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Master Ellis, second by Master Cullen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carried. We're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Use them tomorrow.